putting in work. Work, yeah. Putting in work. I thank God for the favor when the money come. Half for the time, tax fees, insufficient funds. What I gotta do to get ahead? I'm on to something. What I gotta do to get a raise? They all be wanting putting in work. All I ever wanted was a choice. Rolls Royce.
At the Modest Sports Show, we believe in teamwork, and not just on the field. That's why we're proud to partner with Lift Up the Vulnerable, an incredible organization protecting the world's most at-risk children in war-torn regions. Through your support, Lift Up the Vulnerable prevents human trafficking, offers life-saving education, and provides hope to vulnerable communities. Over 86% of every dollar they receive goes directly into their transformative work in Sudan and South Sudan. Make a difference today by becoming a monthly sponsor. Whether it's $10 or $500 a month, every dollar matters. And don't forget, follow Lift Up the Vulnerable on social media to see how your support is changing lives in real time. To learn more about the incredible work they're doing, contact Alex Hill at 205-515-6696 or visit liftupthevulnerable.org. Follow Lift Up the Vulnerable on social media and join the movement. Together, let's lift those up who need it most. Welcome to the Modest Sports Show, home of your college athlete, where we are player-led and player-focused. I'm your host, Corey Albert. I never say Corey Albert. I just sometimes tend to say Corey. I hope you guys are doing wonderful on this Thanksgiving. You are seeing this on Thanksgiving, and I am recording this on Thanksgiving morning at 1 o'clock in the morning. I love you guys so much. That's why I want to get this content to you. I love you guys so much. Right now, stop what you're doing. Drop in the comments, what is one thing you are thankful for on this 2024 Thanksgiving? Me, I'm thankful for the growth that this platform has seen. I'm thankful for you guys. I'm thankful for you right now as you watch this channel or watch this episode. And we just actually reached 500 subscribers on the channel. So with that being said, my hope is in the next year, we're able to triple that, so very thankful for you. And also, what's your favorite Thanksgiving food? Drop that in the comments also. My favorite Thanksgiving food, or I'll say for me, my favorite Thanksgiving combo, I'm going to have to go with the macaroni and cheese and some greens, some collard greens, and the ham, honey baked ham. Yeah, can't beat those. That's the holy trinity for me. With the cornbread though, like I said, just a couple to name a few, but those are my 3 favorite ones. Drop yours in the comments below. Also, while you're here, like, comment, subscribe, do all that good stuff. Follow us on social media, all our platforms, and just continue to grow with us. Continue to rock out with us. I want to give a major shout out to Tom Grossi. He actually did something for me and my channel. I was unfamiliar with who he was, but he did a very big deed for my channel. Monday when we were live, he sent his whole posse, Grossi posse. Shout out to you guys. He sent his whole posse while he was streaming. He's a big YouTuber. I didn't notice at the time, but he has about 700,000 subscribers, and he's heavily involved in the NFL media. And so he sent his live streamers to my page, and they sent a lot of love, and some subscribed, some liked the video. So be sure to go check out that live that took place on Monday, this past Monday. It's the most recent live. And catch our lives every Monday. We stream a Monday Night Football game where I just casually talk to you all the same way I'm talking to you now, but it's in a live format and real-time discussion and real-time interaction. So be sure to catch that live or the lives on Mondays. And like I said, like always, continue to grow with us. Now, as we're past the introduction of this video, tonight we're going to talk about the college football playoff reveal, the one that just came out on Tuesday evening. So if you're watching this, the one that came out on November the 26th. And I'm going to give you some Week 12 thoughts. and whatever else comes to my brain. Y'all know how I typically do this. Sometimes it's run-on sentences. Sometimes it's a whole bunch of just left field thoughts. But I'm going to give it to you raw, uncut, clear, the modest way, the modest sports show way. So let's just kind of go through these rankings. Let's go 1 through 20. I want to do 1 through 20 today, not 1 through 12, because I believe the top 20, it's a lot of, outside of the top 12, there are a lot of scenarios and things that could take place that really might affect the actual 12-team rankings as we end the season. We have 2 weeks left. This week is rivalry. This week is a rivalry week. Next week is the conference championship games, and the week after that, or that following Tuesday, I believe, they'll announce who our 12-team playoff contenders are. So, man, it's exciting. It's just very exciting as we get down to the end of the season, and we've been following it and covering it for so long, and with a lot of passion behind this, a lot of effort and energy put into this. So let's just go. Let's go. At 20, we have Texas A&M. At 19, BYU. At 18, Iowa State. At 17, Tulane. 16, Arizona State. 15, South Carolina. 14, Ole Miss. 13, Alabama. 12, Clemson. 11, Boise State. 10, Indiana. 9, SMU. 8, Tennessee. 7, Georgia. 6, Miami. 5, Notre Dame. 4, Penn State. 3, Texas. 2, Ohio State. 1, Oregon. Now, like I said, I want to talk about all 20 of these teams because they're all close, and I believe they all have a path to get to the playoffs. Now, what we will do is we'll group these teams off and how we speak about them in conference. So I've categorized them per conference. So if I say there's a blank team, if there's a 2-team and a 7-team, I group them by conference, okay? So be mindful of that as I go along with these teams. Let's start off with the Big 12. So in the Big 12, we have Arizona State, Iowa State, Colorado, and BYU in a 4-way tie. All right. Now, Arizona State clinches a Big 12 championship spot with a win against Arizona this weekend in their rivalry game. Arizona has lost 6 of their last 7 games. And for me, Arizona didn't really live up to what I thought they would be coming into the season. At this point in the year, they're 4-7. And Arizona, similar to Utah, I thought they were going to come into the year as a Big 12 championship contender, right? They have really disappointed. And maybe we put a little too much emphasis on Tetero McMillan and Noah Fafita in that combination. And we didn't really look in other areas of that team. Definitely, have a high-powered offense between those two people. But they didn't – I guess we didn't really do our just due on that Arizona football team. So Arizona State clinches a playoff spot – clinches a Big 12 championship spot with the win over Arizona. Iowa State clinches a Big 12 championship spot with the win versus Kansas State this weekend. This game, to me, is going to be a tough one for the Cyclones. Kansas State, they're 5-3 right now in conference play. They're ranked 5th in the Big 12 just after CU, or Colorado, that is. Now, I believe that's going to be a tough opponent for Iowa State because Kansas State has a very, very powerful run game. They have DJ Gideon, and they also have Avery Johnson, their quarterback, who can really create explosive plays in the run game. They also have a receiver, number 1. I cannot think of his name right now. Very explosive down the field receiver, very shifty, speedster off the line of scrimmage. He can do a lot of good things for them as well. So Iowa State definitely cannot come into this game this weekend sleeping. Else, if Iowa State loses this game, and it's so many, I did the reading and the research on it, but it's so many ways and scenarios and things that can happen. If Iowa State or Arizona State were to lose this weekend, it's going to shift things drastically and dramatically amongst the Big 12. So for the sake of tonight's discussion, I'm going to forego that talk, right? We'll see how things play out, and we will go from we will go from after this weekend when the games are played. We'll speak on the actual conference champions or those who will be playing in the conference championship game, and then so forth and so on. And as that heads into the final 12-team playoff. Let's move on to the group of 5. We have Tulane at 17. I said Tulane has really looked impressive all season. Only 2 losses, one to that Kansas State team, which we just mentioned, and one to Oklahoma. Tulane ranks 9th in total defense and 10th in rushing offense. Those are 2 of their strong. That's like Tulane's strong suit in just as a football team. John Sumrall leading that team. He's done very impressive things as a head coach, dating back to his days at Troy. Now he's brought success to Tulane. I really feel like John Sumrall is, and we have some connections, but John Sumrall has definitely paved and made his way and made noise as a head coach. So very excited to see him continue to grow and rack up on his accomplishments and success as a head coach. Now, one thing that I thought was very cool about this Tulane team is, right, we said they ranked 10th in rushing offense. Well, they're led in the running backs room by Mekhi Hughes, who's a Birmingham, Alabama native. He has amassed 1,200 yards rushing on the season. But here's the caveat. Here's what I thought was very special about this running back group at Tulane. They have 5 running backs with more than 100 yards rushing on the season. I thought that was very impressive. I think it speaks to the players that Tulane has, but also the culture that Tulane has and the culture that they've established in their running backs room and just in their run game in general. We're going to get guys touches. If you show that you can run the football, we're going to get you some touches. 5 running backs with 100 rushing yards on the season. One team. That's amazing. That's really amazing. That's really amazing. I didn't even do the totals for all the yards in total that room has together. But you have one guy with 1,200 yards. You have at least 5 with 100. You do the math. That's pretty impressive. That's why they rank 10th in rushing offense in the NCAA. Boise State at 11. They have hovered between 11 and 13 these past couple of rankings, right? So Ashton Jeanty, he's having a Heisman season. He's surpassed 2,000 yards rushing as well on the year. Through 11 games at that. That's very impressive. That's really Heisman worthy, okay? Now, my question to you guys, right? We understand that Boise State is 10-1 coming into this week, okay? And they have Oregon State this weekend. But my question to you is, right, given that really only one group of 5 team is going to make it, and you still have Army hovering around there in that in the lower 20s or higher, however you want to mention it. But is Boise State, are they really a playoff team, or are they going to make the playoffs due to the storyline that Ashton Jeanty has kind of, I guess, brung on this team? I definitely think Ashton Jeanty helps their case, and I'm not at all saying that Boise State is not a playoff contending team. I really haven't watched much of Boise State this season, but what I will say, right, when we think about a group of 5, Tulane is an exception, and this is what I mean when I say that. Tulane has played 2 Power 4 conference schools. Now, Boise State has 2 in Oregon, right? And Oregon did struggle with Boise State. Although I feel like Oregon hadn't quite reached – Oregon was still trying to gel together as a team at that time. And I think since they've played Boise State, they've looked very different. I guess you could say the same could be said about Oklahoma and Kansas State. Although Kansas State, 5-3 in conference play, Oklahoma really hasn't looked at – I think they're 2-5 now in conference play after the loss or after the win against Alabama. But I say all of that to say Tulane to me has looked like the more impressive group of 5 school against Power 4 teams. That's my honest opinion. I think Tulane is, at this point in the year, looks like a more complete team. So record aside, right, does Boise State deserve to get into the 12-team playoff over Tulane, even if, both went out and we're imagining that Tulane is going to be the AAC championship winner, as well as Boise State going to be the Mountain West championship winner. So that's something to consider. I'm curious to that, and I wonder what you all think about that as well. Let's move on to the ACC, right? Clemson at 12. Clemson has been quietly winning this year, right? After their game to Georgia, I've mentioned this on several other episodes in the season. Not a lot of glitz, I feel, and a lot of impress or a lot of excitement or joy, however you want to label it, to what Clemson is doing, solely because their strength of schedule, and that's just me. The ACC has really been a weak conference, I guess we could say, this year. Not a lot going on in the ACC. A lot of disappointments in conferences across the board, now that I think about it. Florida State probably being the most disappointing team in college football, let alone the ACC. But for Clemson, they ranked 7th in total offense. I said similar to Miami's defense. They aren't as explosive on defense, ranking 49th in total defense, giving up about 350 yards per game. I feel like the weak areas of that defense for Clemson are their rush defense, and they're giving up around 140 yards a game, and passing yards as well. Their passing yards, they're 53rd passing yards allowed, 56 in rush defense, and passing yards, they're giving up about 211 yards per game. And so the defense, right, they're hovering kind of midway throughout college football. Defense isn't quite as strong as that offense. And so similar to Miami, it's like have the ability to score on offense, can be explosive, but can they stop people? And so that's a caveat. That's something to note with this Clemson defense. Now, SMU at 9. I said this is their first year in a new conference, okay? I mentioned this in the preseason when we were talking about this team. If you go back and look at the video, I want to say about 4 months ago at this point, on a whim, I said SMU, right, have been come to a finale in the AAC, finishing 11-3. I thought that would hold weight with them transitioning into power conference football in the ACC, okay? Only because I didn't feel like the ACC, which we have all come to see and come to know, the ACC didn't have a lot of teams, or the strength in the ACC wasn't, the margin of elitism was kind of narrow, right, or actually large, meaning you had a lot of teams at the top who were good, and then you had very poor teams. And so I saw SMU coming into the ACC like, okay, we're 11-3 in that conference of football in the AAC. And I'm like, okay, well, it's not much. I just feel like if the team remained constant, which they did through its transition, I felt like they would be a good football team. And SMU, lo and behold, is sitting at 9 in the college football 12-team playoff in week 4, that is. And so I looked at the numbers. Total offense, they're pretty explosive on offense, but averaging about 445 yards per game, and they're pretty balanced. They've shown that they can run the ball. They've shown that they can pass. And so that's always a lovely thing to see. Moving on, let's go to Miami at 6. Miami has been a tale of one side. That's what I'll say. Been a tale of one side. I definitely think they can score points, but they can't get stops. And this is going to hurt the team as they go deeper into the postseason, right? They're ranked 3rd in passing offense at 360.2 yards per game. Now, this is a very interesting stat, and I just wanted to bring it to your attention. Cam Ward ranks 2nd in points responsible for, with 242 on the season. And so meaning, out of all the points that Miami has scored over the course of the year, Cam Ward is second in the nation in every player that plays college football. He's second in the nation points responsible for his team with 242. So if he was a basketball player, right, he scored 242 points on the year to help his team find success. So that was something that was interesting to me. This Miami team is very good. We know on offense, very explosive. Can they stop people? Notre Dame sitting at 5, okay? Notre Dame, how do I feel about Notre Dame? Notre Dame is a team that is like, they are great, they are good, okay? But what is it worth? It's a few teams on the top end of college football where we can all say the same things about it, but I'm not going to harp on that tonight. Notre Dame, 78th strength of schedule. Okay, coming up this weekend, they have their rivalry game versus USC. And not really much to see with Notre Dame. I still feel like their offense is limited from their lack of passing game, and I think that'll be exposed kind of as their season progresses and they play better competition. But right now they're ranked 99th in passing yards at about 198.1 yards per game. So not really impressive. Of course, we know they have an elite running game with the quarterback that they have as well as the running back. But not really a lot to say and a lot to see with this Notre Dame team. It's a few teams, like I said, we just got to wait and see. We got to see just how good they're going to be against elite competition and how well they'll be able to handle adversity. Let's move on to the SEC. This is our home base. Okay? So, in the SEC, we have Texas A&M sitting at 20, all right? And I think it's great now if we know we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 teams in the top 25 college football playoff ranking. So, again, the SEC, just so we're very clear, the SEC is the strongest the SEC is the strongest conference in college football. No doubt about that. Just so we're clear, our stance on the Modest Sports Show is the SEC is the strongest conference in college football. Point blank, period. So, Texas A&M sitting at 20. They can clinch an SEC championship game spot with the win over Texas this weekend. Okay? I believe they have a running quarterback who is very good, but they are limited on offense, similar to Texas A&M. They do have an okay defense. Their defense, to me, has really shown that they can be explosive and they can make plays, okay? But sometimes they fall victim and liable to like explosive plays or teams being able to get their run game established. And so it's a tale of, two stories with this Texas A&M team. And I really feel like they're a team that rides and feeds on momentum. When they have momentum, they ride and feed on it. When not, they kind of see adversity. They're coming off a road loss to Auburn, and Auburn being the chippy team that we know they are. This Texas A&M versus Texas game it's going to be a good game because it's going to be a good matchup. And that also adds implications. Texas A&M, if they beat Texas in their rivalry, and let's just say they were to go to the SEC championship game and win that, do they deserve a spot in the playoffs with 3 losses? Like this other team in the SEC we're about to talk about, South Carolina, sitting at 15. They've looked impressive all year, okay? I became more sold on South Carolina when I seen them compete with LSU early in the year now. The version of LSU that we saw early in the year, okay, not the one of late. I believe Lenore Sellers has especially looked impressive. I mean, he has had growing pains and showed his age at times, but for the most part, I think he can lead that team to some great places. He's a redshirt freshman, like I said, and so if all else remains constant and he's able to develop, I think South Carolina can be a good team in years to come. I think Shane Beamer has laid a foundation at South Carolina and has created a culture and kind of reignited a culture in, I think, toughness at South Carolina. And so With Shane, and with that South Carolina Gamecock squad, I'm interested to see what they will look like this weekend against Clemson. And what are your thoughts on that? Do we feel like South Carolina can clinch a playoff spot with the win over Clemson this weekend? And if so, how good do we think South Carolina is going to play Clemson this weekend? Where do you feel like their weak points or their strong suits are going to be at versus this Clemson team? Curious to know what you think on that. Ole Miss sitting at 14. I will say this was a very big disappointment to me. Very big disappointment. Two teams, the next two teams I'm going to mention were very big disappointments. Ole Miss completely blew that game against Florida. I sat and watched at least the last few minutes of the fourth quarter, and it was jaw-dropping. I think it was jaw-dropping for anybody who was watching that game. Jackson Dart completely sold, and it's no test. I don't want to obviously use that as a means to degrade him. He's still a very good quarterback, but man, that's a tough way to go out. That's a tough way to kind of get put out the playoffs. Like, I could see if it wasn't on your own merit that something like that happened, like if it was something outside of your control. But to throw really 3 interceptions in the last 3 minutes of that football game is kind of crazy. We seen the interception to Florida in the end zone, right? Florida, they go 3 and out. Okay, Ole Miss gets the ball back, no timeouts left. Jackson Dart throws an interception, really and truly, but thankfully, right, the ball was kind of broken up by the ground on one of the corners who made the second interception. Then you come right back after. You can't make this stuff up. You come right back after the replay, okay, and throw the third interception to seal the game. So I guess it was in the stars for Ole Miss to not make the playoffs, and I really hate that because, like I said, a lot of kudos to their defense. They're going to finish this year somewhere in the top 25 in total defense, and I really feel like that squad in Oxford made a very big commitment to the defensive side of the ball this offseason, only to get to this point in the year and your offense be the reason that you weren't able to get it done. So, praying for Ole Miss. Alabama at 13. Another team that blew it. I watched Alabama versus Oklahoma in complete dismay. I believe only being able to score 3 points in 60 minutes of play is, I don't know, man. I don't know. Here are some stats for you. Milroe with 3 interceptions. The offense had 234 total yards. They only averaged about 4.1 yards per play. And their time of possession was 25 minutes, 49 seconds. Now, while all that is bad, right, can't help but, again, with this Alabama squad, bring into question some of the coaches. I don't understand what the reluctance is to use the running back run game. Why are we running Jalen Milroe as much as we're running running backs? For instance, Haynes and Miller, Justice Haynes and Jan Miller combined in that game for 15 carries. Milroe had 15 carries himself. Now, maybe not all designed quarterback runs, but still, nonetheless, 15 carries between 2 people and 1 person. 2 people had the same amount of carries as 1 person. Like, at some point, you do have to bring into question, the play caller. Like, what is the play caller doing? And not necessarily in a way to question their authority, but like, what is, objectively speaking, what is the goal of the play caller? And so this Alabama team, I feel, in most part, has really struggled throughout the course of the season to find its identity on offense. And I think they just came up short towards the end of the year. Now, I do find it rather hilarious that Alabama still has the chance to make the playoffs. Like the committee did leave the door open for a 3-loss Alabama team, and it's funny. It's fun. Like I said, Nick Saban, he still has his hand all over that program. Because any other team, as you can see, Ole Miss, they're not going to have the same chance that Alabama does to get into the playoffs. And it's funny to me. I'm not mad at it. It's just funny. It's just funny. Also, I want to mention that play, right, the touchdown that we saw taken away from Ron Williams. And I've spoken, I have, like I said, guys, I have my ear to the ground every day speaking with avid fans of college football and people who just enjoy this landscape, right, that we all love. There has to be something done from a administrative standpoint with referees and kind of the egregious calls they make. Because it's amazing, like it is amazing to me, because for the most part, especially in the day and age that we live in now, coaches have to answer to their shortcomings. Players have to answer to theirs. Coaches hold fans accountable this day and age. They got to answer to theirs. Everyone around the game has to answer to their shortcomings, except for referees, except for umpires. Why is that the case? So I definitely think maybe we should implement something where after the game, the same way the coaches have a press conference, you put a mic in front of the umpires, you ask them questions about calls they made, and you question their judgment. Because I think then we can put a magnifying lens and possibly be able to redirect or cure some of these penalties that are being pulled into question. Because it's like, if I throw this flag right after the game, I'm going to have to answer to it. So it's going to kind of put more pressure on the referee to make a smart judgment. And so that I think that would be, it's just an idea, but I do think that would be something that's interesting to see. And so with that being said, Alabama, they go against Auburn on November the 30th. And there were some comments made by one DeMarcus Riddick. Now, the comments were funny to me because I watched DeMarcus grow up. I know DeMarcus' grandmother. Me and DeMarcus are from the same place. We're both from Chilton County. Went to the same high school. He's a few years younger than me, but he's done some amazing things. Highly touted recruit. And so now he's at Auburn in his true freshman season, and he's making some noise. He's making some plays on the field. Now, I will bring in a comment that he made. And I quote, "Ron Williams ain't no big player to me," says Auburn linebacker DeMarcus Riddick. Goes on to say, "I will not lose to Bama while I'm here." Now, to that, I'd say I definitely understand being confident in yourself and being confident in your team. And I understand that the question was asked to him by another reporter. I just feel like we got to do a better job at how we address and how we kind of answer some of these questions, because we know that there are setups. And so I also want to mention that he said, "I will not lose to Bama while I'm here." Well, if this was a basketball game, I think that he would have more bearing over the outcome. And not to say he won't make a play over the course of that game to help pull his team a victory, but I will say that man, DeMarcus, man, you ain't got to cover Ron. You're not going to be the one in the slot matched up against him. And so there are some things over the course of that game that he's not going to have control over. But it's all the nature of the beast. If he go out here and he back it up, again, I'm one of them that if you are handling your business on the field and you're doing what you need to do, then there's nothing anybody can say about it. Now, on the contrary, you get out there and your mouth writing checks that you can't cash, that's another story. We got to reel it back some. But I love it. I like it. It's all part of sport. All right, Tennessee at 8. Tennessee, another quiet team. They got one more test to finish the season. They had Vandy And something that I noticed with two of these teams, Tennessee and Georgia alike, both with 2 losses and on the road. But that was just something curious to me, and I think it kind of further backs the point, especially in the SEC, the comments made by Kirby Smart, man, that it's hard to win on the road. I think it just further demonstrates that point. But aside from that, Tennessee has an elite run game. Dylan Sampson, he's doing great things, sitting at 1,200 yards on the season. 1,200 yards on the season, and the sound defense. This Tennessee team has a very sound defense. They're ranked 6th in total defense, only giving up 284.3 yards per game. So Tennessee is another team who, when we see them against elite competition, I feel like they're gonna be kind of head hunting and trying to get some get back for what Georgia did to them a few weeks ago. Georgia sitting at 7, okay? Now, for the most part, Georgia has handled business like Tennessee. And I mentioned this, both of their losses come on the road. Now, with this Georgia team, okay, when Beck is hot, that team is almost unstoppable. But when he is not, that team is pedestrian. They are very pedestrian when Beck is not on, okay? Another thing, and I haven't heard anyone say this, and I really didn't notice this until I did a little more homework. I think Georgia's lack of run game limits their offense, okay? And when I really thought about it, I said, we haven't seen an elite running back emerge out of that group this season. Georgia's running back room. We haven't seen an elite running back. We brought in Trevor Etienne in the offseason, and I think he had high hopes, but we know he went down with a rib injury a couple weeks ago. Nate Frazier is their leading rusher, and he only has 537 rushing yards on the year on 112 carries. Okay? And so I think for Georgia, their lack of run game is really attributed to them not being able to pass the ball like they would like, and teams really being able to get a lot of pressure on Beck and move him around in the pocket. And so this Georgia team, they have a very high ceiling and they have a very low floor. You know what I mean? So Georgia is another team that we have to see how they look against more elite competition. Texas at 3. Texas also has looked very pedestrian at times. We know they're coming off a win over Florida, and that was big time. But, this Texas team, I said they still have some very explosive pieces, though, in spite of them looking pedestrian at times. Someone who has impressed me is Gunnar Helm. He is Gunnar Helm's Gunnar Helm is Quinn Ewer's leading receiver, okay? It's one of his favorite targets, especially in the red zone. He has 5 touchdowns on the season. And I also like Texas to beat Texas A&M, just so we can go ahead and get that out the way now. I like Texas to beat Texas A&M. I think Texas' real and true test, right, is going to come in the SEC championship game, okay, against probably a rematch Georgia, because we know Georgia has clinched. And so I like Texas and Georgia in the SEC championship game. And I think, I'm not going to say pick a winner yet. I'm going to let these games be played this weekend. But I do feel like Georgia or Texas is kind of awaiting the opportunity to see Georgia again and kind of get some get back. My question to you is, if Texas loses to Texas A&M, could we see a Texas loss in the championship game and them being seated somewhere between 5 and 12, right? And now as I ask you that question, I think it's kind of obvious. So let me get a little bit more specific. If Texas loses to Texas A&M, where do you think they're going to be seated 5 through 12? Where do you think? Are they going to be a 5 through 8 seed or 7 seed? Are they going to be 8 or 9 through 12. Like, where do you are they going to have home field advantage? Where do you put this Texas team if they were to lose to Texas A&M? Very curious to know what you think. Now, moving on to the Big Ten, our last and final conference of the night. Okay, Indiana at 10. They got whooped on the line of scrimmage in their first true test of the year against this Ohio State team, right? Only had 151 yards of total offense, and they averaged 2.6 yards per play on the game. That's atrocious. A lot of negative plays were made in that game, though, on Ohio State's behalf. Ohio State had 5 sacks in the game, and to me, it was just a complete whooping, right? Indiana, they looked good on their first drive, but after that, they stalled out. They looked very efficient, and I thought, based on that first drive, that, okay, Indiana came to play ball, and they're showing you that they are for real. But just looking at the numbers, Ohio State dominated that game. So Indiana sitting at 10 is one of those things where it's like, of course you can't put them out the playoff. They got to be in the playoff, right? But how they're going to look as, the postseason progresses, like we say, is going to be very curious to me. And tell me what you think. Does this Indiana team, do they bounce back? Are they, now that they've faced an Ohio State team that's elite, do they have what it takes now if they were to face another elite team and get a win in the playoffs? Tell me what you think about that. Penn State sitting at 4. Not really much to say about Penn State. They have had the least path of resistance into getting into this year's playoff. Strength of schedule ranking 32nd. Penn State, we know how I feel about Penn State. I think a lot of you feel that same very way about Penn State. And Penn State, much like Indiana, much like Texas, much like an Alabama team or Texas or Miami, like, just got to wait and see what they're really capable of doing against elite competition. Now, Ohio State did not do them too bad. I think the final score of that game was 20-13. So it wasn't a bad outing from Penn State. But does Penn State have what it takes to win the big games? That's what we want to know. That's what the people want to know. Ohio State sitting at 2. Only second to Oregon. They looked complete against Indiana, and they showed they could balance their offense and do what they want to do versus good teams, okay? And what I mean when I say that, Ohio State seemingly this year has struggled to run the ball when they can pass, and they seem to struggle passing the ball when they could run. I feel like this Indiana game was the first true game against a good team where we saw like them have some balance, them be able to do what they wanted to do and execute in ways that they wanted to execute. And so this Ohio State team, and many have them at 1. I've seen like Josh Pate and other talking heads. Ohio State is their number 1 team. And I guess you could say that technically because Ohio State is more battle-tested than Oregon. But coming in at 1, Oregon, they're the baddest team in the land. That's just my opinion. 1,000-yard rusher in Jordan James, explosive receivers, and an elite quarterback. They're the team to beat. I don't think Oregon is second to anybody. I feel like this Oregon team, they have an elite defense as well. I think Dan Lanner has taken his time constructing this team and getting the pieces that he's needed to actually make the kind of run that I'm expecting that he makes this year. And like we know, and like I've said, Oregon is going to be your 2025 national championship winner. And so I'm really looking forward to how this season ends and what this bracket is going to look like after the rivalry week this week, and then the conference championships next week, okay? Now, a lot is probably going to happen within these 2 weeks. A lot is probably going to happen within these 2 weeks, okay? But I'm interested. I'm just so interested to see how this is all going to play out. This is the first time something like this has happened in college football. And so I'm interested to see how this is all going to play out, man. I cannot wait. But Like always, guys, I appreciate you for sticking around. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, follow us on all our social media accounts. So very thankful for the sponsors. If you're interested in sponsoring the show, please get in contact with me. You can find all my information in the link in the bio. And anywhere on social media, reach out to me. You can get in contact with me. Let's get your business highlighted and showcased on the show in front of all these lovely, modest viewers. You guys have a safe and thankful, very grateful, gratitudefulness, all of that Thanksgiving. I hope you enjoy some of your best foods. Turn this on while you're watching or before Thursday Night Football comes on. And be sure to give me a listen. And I appreciate you. I'm thankful for you on this holiday. And just like that, we're out.